On the passing of Robert Durost. Once upon a time, we used to be able to count on each other always being there. Or we thought we could. You could go away for long, sometimes almost unforgivably long periods, and when you came back, everyone would be pretty much where you left them, and how you left them. That was the kind of village we were. That was the way it felt. Certainly all the houses and stores and other businesses and buildings would be right where they were before. Just about all of them. Some might have changed a bit. A couple might have even burned down. Once it seemed as though half one side of the river, its business district, was going to go up in flames. That was a shock. Things like that didn't happen in Perth-Andover, but the buildings were big and old and not particularly pretty, and life went on, and the village seemed to fill in around them. Certainly people were the same. Some of them still told the same old jokes so many times, and so routinely, that they were used instead of hello or goodbye. See you around, not if I see you first. One of my brothers used to slap his knee and guffaw every time he told the same old line he'd said almost every single day before. Multiply the number of years by 365. That was just about it. Then the years stopped. Because it turned out people actually did die now and then. Not like they do today, maybe, but it happened. We knew that. It always surprised us, but we knew it was probably going to happen sooner or later. Everyone dies sooner or later. It seemed probable that some of us would. Not today, not this year, some other day, some other year. Hell, we had more veterans in town than we had names on our war memorial, and we've got lots of those. Trees would be taller, dogs came and went, Dutch elm disease swept through the village like a curse against the land and the sky, wiping out almost all of those beautiful trees that were all over town and shaded its streets and seemed to burst against the sky like green fireworks. But life beneath their cadavers or around their stumps went on pretty much as usual, and the other trees flourished. Manitoba maples mostly. Bad weeds, you could say. Otto Zwicker, the blacksmith, went on being Otto Zwicker, the blacksmith, long after there were any horses in town, or even passing through. He smithed other things. He trapped things. Frank the nigger left town before we realized we weren't supposed to call him that. Most of us thought it was his name. Nellie DeWitt, one of several war brides in our town, as we called it, could be seen as a silhouette nervously puffing away on cigarette after cigarette as the thunder and lightning crashed and flashed around her as she sat out in the car she couldn't drive, thought she was safe in. With those kids? Probably not. Old Dr. Ritchie, my grandfather, a veterinarian, could be counted on to talk your ear off as you sat with him on the front porch of the big and beautiful old house beneath his pines and between his elms, or their wrecks, while your dog died in his back room, or you kept trying to tell him you really had to go now. The wife was waiting. The cows had to be milked. Something had to be fed. The chickens, the pigs, the banker. The dog would have died anyway, my grandfather told me, and they would have blamed it on him. But meanwhile, he'd show visitors, clients, victims the horribly knotted log he'd removed from the hind quarters of a racehorse once upon a time, and its owner never knew the difference. The people who smiled at you yesterday would smile at you today, 9 times out of 10, and pretty much for the same reason. They were the same, you were the same, and we're both living, after all. I don't know when death moved in like it has, when cancer and autism and Alzheimer's took over the village and the valley, and even the people who'd long before fled to the hills beyond. But things changed. At first, I thought it was the autumn. The rocket-like thing came tumbling out of the sky off one of the giant bombers that used to come in swinging low over our villages and farms from the biggest strategic air command base in the world and the one closest to Moscow, believe it or not. People got sick that winter. They got very sick. People died. And if you yourself got sick, then it felt like you were going to die the next breath you took, the next step you were going to take. You were treated with something that could best be described as looking and tasting like cream of iodine, which is what you use to treat radiation sickness. You got better, the dying stopped, life went on. It went on even after the base was closed down, taking all those big wages and salaries and flyboys away from their stomping grounds on both sides of the border. Other than that, not much changed. People got poorer. That didn't feel very new. They built another dam, this time downriver, and then another one below that. We got floods. The river that never once reached my grandfather's crabapple tree down beside it, it's still there, came surging right past it and over its own banks. By that time, half each side of the village had been torn down or moved as the water table rose, basements crumbled, or some engineer or planner somewhere just thought things would be better this way. Safer. You can't wash away a house or a fire hall or a restaurant or a drugstore or an old carriage house that isn't there anymore. We survived all this. Sometimes it even felt the village would. It's been through just about every war the world could throw at it since the war that brought it into existence, when the Americans turned on the crown we still believe in. It took our fathers, it took our children. It even took 3 of our women, including my grandmother's beautiful kid sister, blasted to shreds by a grenade in Belgium. We endured. We even prevailed. Life went on. Sometimes it even seemed like the hallucination is that stubborn. We would survive the record flood that ravaged the village at the very start of spring this year, a couple of lifetimes ago. Then Martha Kelly, 73, healthy, even robust, walked away one stormy Friday night and disappeared from our view forever. Well, old people do that, we guessed. We were told that. It was happening everywhere else. The last time anything like that happened here was when a justice of the peace vanished over 120 years ago. So, what are the odds? The governments we elected would surely do their duty. Our river would be made safer, our most endangered houses and buildings would be flood-proofed or moved. Those governments did nothing. They delayed. They threw out sops and offered pittances and more delays. What else is new? But Robert Durost died a few days ago. We buried him last week. He was 43. He was one of those people you knew you could always take for granted. He was big. He was always smiling. He was always there. That's how they knew so quickly something was wrong when he didn't show up when he normally would have. The Robert Durosts of the world don't do things like that. They go to work when they're supposed to. They come home to the people they love and who love them when they're supposed to. And they're always supposed to. They remind us that maybe we're always supposed to too. All of us. Sure. He was one of us, but he wasn't quite like us in that way. He was more like the sun. He was more like our hills. He was more like our river was before the floods, before the dams, before it became something we should be fearful of routinely. Every spring, every year, maybe all the time. He was more like the moon, and stars that shone down on the otherwise dark waters of that river that hid him from us in the night, that hid our loss, that took away our right to maybe take anyone or anything for granted ever again. Maybe it's perfectly appropriate that someone you could always count on just simply drove away from us after all, trying to reach us to go home again. That the last day of his life was just a morning. But once upon a time,